let's go ahead and create a class called Finder. Okay, just bear with me here. So I'm going to say class. The idea is that this class will enclose a function that will be able to find an item from a list that we provide to it. A property here, a field. So I'm going to use private. We haven't seen this, but private means that this field is not accessible by anyone but the class, this class, right? I'm going to say val and then list. And then I'm going to create actually a list, and then I'm going to put inside of angle brackets like this, I'm going to put the types that this list will contain. Okay, so it's just a list in general. And so here inside of these angle brackets, we're going to pass what's called the types that are needed, or the types that this list will be expecting to host. So in this case, I'm going to say it's going to be a string, a list of string. Okay. And then inside here of our class Finder, we're going to create a function. So I'm going to call this find item. And then to find an item, again, remember, there are many other ways to find an item in a list. So this is not necessarily the best way. This is just to illustrate something that I want to illustrate to you. So I'm going to say find item. In this case, I'm going to pass the element that we need to find. I'm going to call it element as such, and I'm going to make it a string type. But then inside of this function here, I'm going to pass another function because we know this is very possible to do. And so I'm going to say found item, and this found item here, of course, as a property parameter, I'm going to make it a function, as I said, and in this case I'm going to say it's going to expect an element, which is going to be type of string as a parameter, and I'm going to append this exclamation point because I want this to be nullable. Because the idea is if no element is found, I want to be able to pass inside of this found item or this element inside of this function here. I want to be able to pass a null value. So what do? You put this exclamation point as such. All right. So and then of course I'm going to return a unit as such. And if you remember correctly, if we have a function that we are calling or that we're passing as a parameter, and this function is the last parameter, that should ring a bell. That means then this can be accessed as a lambda, and we'll see that. Okay, so let's give a body to this function. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say val. First I'm going to create an item found variable, and I'm going to set that to the list we're getting, and I'm going to use the filter method, which is actually a lambda, right? You saw it before, and here I'm going to pass the predicate, right? So I'm going to say it, if it is equal to the element that we are trying to look for, right? Then we know we've found that element. And remember, when we filter a list, what's returned is going to be a list, right? So that's why we put that inside of this item found. Okay. So at this point, we will have found that list, or I should say that item we're looking for, and it's going to be inside of a new list, which is going to be inside of item found. I can say item found list just to be more specific. All right, so and then outside here, because I still have this found item, which is a function that we're passing, I want to pass something to it. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to say if item found, item list, I should say, is not null or empty. If that's the case, then I'm going to say found item, that function there, and I'm going to pass, in this case, null, because it's just going to say, well, there's no element that's been found, right? Because the item found list, which we use this filter here, is empty, so it doesn't have anything. So we're just going to say, well, we found nothing. Else, we are going to say found item, and then we're going to pass the item that we found. Now you have to remember this item found list, right? It is indeed a list which will contain one item that so I'm going to get the item itself. So I'm going to say item found list again, and then I'm going to just say dot first item. But this will just go ahead and get the first item it can find, which incidentally is going to be the only item that was found on a list. So 1, that's fine. So let's go and see how can we invoke this find item here, which is inside of this finder class. So in main, I'm going to say val. First of all, I'm going to create a list, right? Items. And I'm going to say list of. Just to simplify things, I'm going to pass a few elements here, but they have to be strings. Let's say Raphael, Gina, George, and James, of course. All right, so we have a list of names there. Next, we're going to say val, and I'm going to say finder. It's going to be equal to finder. Make sure we're getting our finder that we just created, not this Sun Tools package there. All right, and then we have to pass the list. In this case, it's going to be list of items. So let's say list and pass the list of items. Okay, very good. And then I'm going to say finder and invoke the find element. Because we can see the element, I'm just going to go ahead and pass here element. It's going to be a string, and I want to find Gina first. Let's see what's going to happen. All right, now we're having a little issue here because remember, find item, there isn't this found item function that we passed as a parameter, and we can put trailing lambda like this, and of course it's going to return either a null string or an actual string. So in this case here, I'm just going to say print ln and pass our item. In fact, I'm going to say found item as such. At item, this has to be it. Could have changed this to item, but that's fine. Okay, very simple. Let's see what's going to happen if we run this. All right, it says here found Gina. Very good, so it works. What if I just put an empty string just to see both cases? Found null. That's great because we found nothing. So as we say here, if there's nothing in there, we're just going to pass null to the found item function there. Okay, so it's working perfectly. Now we have a problem here. The problem is that this finder class and find item function inside of it only work for one type. In this case, only works for list of strings. Because if I were to create another list here, say val list of numbers, for instance, say list of, and pass here a few numbers, and pass this list of numbers to our finder like this, we're going to have issues. If you hover over, you will see that we have type mismatch, required list strings, right? But found a list of int. All right, so this is not good because now we have some sort of a limitation of what we can pass onto our finder class and incidentally onto our find item function. So this problem here can be solved in a few ways. We can duplicate this code, create another finder, and then put a list in here inside of so change the types here, right, to int, int, and int, and then call it good. And a few changes, and then we're good. Okay. And if we want to, for instance, find a Boolean type or even a custom type, a data type that we created, we'll have to do the same thing. But there's a better way. This better way is called generics, which we are going to talk about in the next video.